everybody, welcome to the Comic Game Movie Show. My name is Deshaun, and today I'm here to review Star Wars Andor. Now, this show is a prequel to Rogue One, which in of itself was a prequel to the original trilogy. So this is a prequel show to a prequel movie. Taking place 5 years before the events of Rogue One, we follow Diego Luna returning to the role of Cassian Andor. Now, Diego Luna is a great actor. I first noticed him in Rogue One, but then after that, I saw him do an amazing job in Narcos Mexico, which just made me even more excited to see the guy come back to play this role. It's always great when you see somebody do that. Like I felt the same way when Scarlett Johansson went and did Marriage Story, and then I knew she was coming back to play Black Widow because I was like, oh man, that's just great. It's always great to know that when you got an actor of that caliber coming in to do, you know, in a big fandom like this, it's always great when you see that. And Rogue One is an interesting movie in of its own, because Rogue One puts more of a focus on the war aspect of the Star Wars, and it puts more of a focus on rebellion is complicated. Like, people remember the big figures of a rebellion. You remember the Luke, the Leia, the Han, and obviously the Chewbacca. You remember the big names, Lando. But rebellions are usually sparked by many people, many small people being fed up. And Rogue One did kind of highlight that, Rogue One really highlighted it, and Rogue One really highlighted just the dangers of the rebellion and the death and the toll it takes and the dirtier, seedier side. There are things that people have to do in rebellions when you're fighting. You do them for the right reasons, but there's still terrible things that you have to live with. Because when it's war, you just got to do things differently when it's war. And Rogue One really put a highlight on that. It was shot differently than any other Star Wars movie. It was kind of shot like a war movie. It felt like a war movie. And in the end of the movie, everyone died. And it was like this suicide mission to get the Death Star plans to, Leia, and which would inevitably be what helps the rebels destroy the Death Star, destroy both Death Stars, is because of what happened here in Rogue One. That these ragtag group of guys sacrificed themselves to give everyone hope. And the main leader of that group in Rogue One was Cassian. And we meet Cassian, and he shows himself to be a cold-blooded man. Like, maybe not a cold-blooded man, but like a man who's willing to do whatever it takes for the cause, a cause he believes in, even kill a friend. So we know that Cassian is pretty hardcore. We know that he is, a man willing to do whatever it takes for the cause. And we find Cassian 5 years later. The rebellion is in its simmers right now. Because if you've been following Star Wars like I have, because I've watched Rebels. And I've seen all the Star Wars, every bit of Star Wars that's a series or a movie, I've seen it, except for Solo. I still haven't seen Solo, but everything I've seen. So you can kind of so if you've seen Rebels, then you know that, like, a lot of time people have this misconception, because if you just saw the original trilogy and if you just watch the trilogies, then you would just assume that, well, the rebellion started when Luke, basically the rebellion started as simultaneously as Luke and Han and Leia and Obi-Wan and them all started on their adventure together. Like, the rebellion started at the same time. When in reality, when you watch the shows and you watch the movie, and when you watch the shows and the animated shows particularly, you realize that the rebellion, especially in Rebels, because Rebels made a Star Wars Rebels, it's a good cartoon show, it's a good animated show. They made a good point to make up the fact that there are tiny sects of rebel groups, of rebellions and groups that are just sparking up all over the galaxy, and sparking up over here and sparking up over there. They just weren't. It just essentially around the time Luke came on the scene, and Leia and Han, and they started doing their thing in the first Star Wars movie. The rebellion started to become whole. Like, all these sects of rebellious groups started to become whole, and you see, and in this show particularly, it really zones in on how rebellions start, on how being oppressed can create these kind of feelings and resentment and anger, and and it starts to spread until sparks, until sparks, until sparks, until sparks, until sparks. And and they kind of really, like, right now in the first 3 episodes, because we got to see the first 3 episodes, they really got that over. First of all, talking about the show itself as a whole, the acting is phenomenal. It's all great acting. I don't think there's a bad actor in it. Diego Luna does an amazing job as Cassian, and he's a little bit more, his Cassian in Rogue One is a bit more cold and calculating, and just like, matter of fact. Whereas this version of Cassian, 5 years, he hasn't, gone. You get the vibe, at least for me, that something's gonna happen in the course of this show to kind of shift him a bit, to shift his commitment to being to the rebellion. Because right now in the first 3 episodes, he's not even a part of the rebellion. He's just some thief who's got hatred towards who's got real hatred towards the Empire. For a multitude of reasons, he's got hatred towards the Empire. He's got a fuck you Empire mentality. But he's just a thief. He's a thief. He's someone who sneaks into places. He's someone that gets into trouble very frequently on his home planet, on his in his hometown. Like, he's not a very liked person at all. In fact, when the closest thing to liked is his mom, and his mom is even, like, what the hell are you doing? He rubs so many people the wrong way because of how he is. He's an opportunistic man. He's a very selfish man. He's a very self-centered man. And it's very interesting to see him at this point because he doesn't have a direction. And that the show, because we know how the show ends, we know that 5 years from this point, he's gonna die. But the thing about it is how the show, and sometimes that doesn't work for prequels. Sometimes knowing the end does ruin the experience a bit. But with this show, the thing that's driving it, the thing that makes it fine, is because even though we know that Cassian isn't going to die until the events of the movie, all the characters they've introduced in the show are characters we've never met before. So we have no idea what happens with them. So there's still a lot up in the air. Sure, you kind of feel like certain characters are gonna die because they didn't show up in the Rogue One. So you kind of go, well, I'm gonna go on a limb and say this character probably dies, but we don't know who else dies. Though I do get the feeling that this show is gonna be a bit more tragic than it's gonna be just as tragic as Rogue One, because even here in this show, he's a lot more calmer, he's a lot more cooler, he's a lot more chill. I mean, he's wiry, but he just did something crazy at the beginning of the show that, it makes sense that he'd be a bit on edge. But he's not as on edge, he's not as cold and calculating as he was in the other show. And in the movie he mentions all his loss and all the things that have happened to him. So none of that's happened yet. Or at least, they haven't revealed it to happen yet. So I feel it coming, I feel a shift coming, and I feel like this is going to be one of those shows. Now, this show takes itself a little bit more seriously because there are points in this show where the way it's shot, the way it's acted, there aren't many jokes. It's very serious. It's really filmed, like, honestly, this is more equated to like an HBO show, and not like not like Game of Thrones or something like that. To like one of those HBO shows that's kind of low, that's kind of like easy kill, that's just like it's all about the drama and the spy, like, because there isn't a lot of huge over the top action set pieces. Now there is one in the 3rd episode, but for the most part there isn't any over the top action set pieces. It's all character driven. It is very serious. It is character driven. The way it's shot, it's shot. You can tell that it's been shot on locations. They a couple years back they showed the entire set that they built, the town, because that town that he's in was built. So it looks amazing. It's shot amazing. The sound design is great. Character acting is great. They introduce new characters and different little subplots that come into each other, and it just grows from there. This show isn't gonna be for everyone though, because I will tell you this: if you got accustomed to it being to the Mandalorian style of it, it's not that. Like the Mandalorian is more like is more like soup action adventure. Whereas this is like, when they tell you this is a spy espionage thriller, like, that's what this is. This is like a crime spy espionage thriller that just happens to be in the Star Wars universe. There are stretches of time where I completely forget this is even a Star Wars show because of the way it's acted and the way it's performed. It just feels like it's just some sci-fi show that's on HBO or Showtime or some shit, or on Netflix or something, you know what I mean? Where it doesn't feel like that. Whereas like The Mandalorian is this grandiose, over the top. Like I always say, the first episode of Mandalorian Season 2, he's literally flying around with his jetpack with taking out a giant fucking creature. Like, it doesn't get any more grandiose and over the top and fun than that. And even in the show, these are grounded show. It's so grounded. None of these characters are perfect. None of these characters are like ultimate badasses. And it kind of threw me off. There are times where Cassian's shooting or Cassian's doing something, and I'm like, in my brain, I'm thinking about Mando. And I'm thinking about how Mando would handle it. I'm like, man, Mando would have took all these dudes out already. But that's not what he is. And this show is grounded. It is showing the sparks, how a rebellion begins. And I can't wait for next week's episode. But all 3 episodes together really give me something. Now, I am a bit worried about the show because while I think this show is fucking has a great start, I am a bit worried that it's not going to get the same numbers as Boba Fett and Obi-Wan, because it's not going to have the same pop as those shows. And it's funny because this show is everything I thought it was going to be. It's just like Rogue One. It's actually even more Rogue One than Rogue One. But I am worried it's not going to get the numbers. I looked on Twitter and stuff, and I didn't really see it like hitting a lot. Like I didn't see it in like the big space a lot. You know, when fucking Boba Fett came out, when Obi-Wan came out, when Mandalorian came out. Regardless of what you feel about 2 of those shows, they did numbers. And I'm worried this show will not do numbers. We shall see, but I am a bit worried. I give the first 3 episodes of Andor a 9 out of 10. I thought it was unique. I thought it was grounded in a way. And like, you guys know how I feel about that. It made the world feel more real. It shows the day-to-day of the little man in this universe and how they feel about it. Like the little man in the Empire totem pole. That like, there's layers to the Empire. There's not just like these top dudes having conversations with like, you know, fucking Darth Vader and shit. No, there are people way below them who have to deal with the day-to-day shit. And I can't wait to see more of it. I can't wait for next week's episode. Thank you guys for joining the Comic Game Movie Show. Please like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Comment below, what did you think of the first 3 episodes of Andor? Comment below and let me know. Thank you guys again. See you in the next one.